It's still surprising to me how much of this is happening at a building named for Henry Whipple. I wasn't sure we'd be able to see it from here, but there's the Whipple building. So context for people who may not be familiar, the Whipple building back there is where ICE has been operating out of, maybe for the entire time they've been in Minnesota, but certainly since Operation Metro Surge. That's where the immigration court is. And as I discussed in a previous video, almost 5 months ago now, that is named for Bishop Henry Whipple. It's a good thing we were able to see that from the parking lot, because my other option was going to be see if I could see it from up there, but looks like that's not actually an option right now. We're at Fort Snelling right now, by the way. So you can go find the previous video to learn a little more about who Henry Whipple was, first Episcopal bishop in the state of Minnesota, advocate for poor and immigrants and a bunch of other groups. But the reason we're back over here today is because the Whipple building was once again in the news this week. The Minnesota Star Tribune and others reported on what's happening over at the immigration court right now, or what has been happening over the past week, I guess. And what seems to be happening in our immigration court here in Minnesota, and probably elsewhere in the United States, is what lawyers are apparently calling mega masters. And what that means is that dozens of people are having their cases all heard at the same time. This was notable here in Minnesota. Apparently on Monday there were 73 people who had their cases heard in the morning, and then another 27 in the afternoon. And apparently that Monday morning session was only scheduled initially to last for half an hour. It ended up going longer. I can't imagine why, trying to fit in 73 people. But yeah, so if you watched the previous reel about Henry Whipple, you'll know that I talked about the U.S.-Dakota War of 1862, and what's happening now once again brought that to mind. So that war was a 6-week conflict between the Dakota and the United States that ended in September of that year out at Camp Release in Montevideo. And what happened almost immediately is that the U.S. troops, led by Henry Sibley, former governor of Minnesota, started to put the Dakota people on trial, people who had been involved in the war. And the important thing for us to note here, one of the similarities, is the amount of time that was taken for each of those trials. Some of those trials lasted for 5 to 10 minutes. 303 people were initially sentenced to be executed after the advocacy of Bishop Whipple and others. Abraham Lincoln lowered that number to 38. Those 38 people were executed in Mankato. Still is the largest mass execution in U.S. history. Everyone else, women, children, elders, were brought here. Nearly 1,500 people spent the winter in a concentration camp here below the fort. Dozens of people died while they were here. Everyone who survived the winter were removed from the state of Minnesota the following spring. And that group did not just include the Dakota, it included the Ho-Chunk, who were not involved in the conflict at all and who had already been moved from their homeland to different reservations multiple times. And it's worth noting before we move on that the Dakota and the Ho-Chunk were both moved onto lands in central Minnesota that were very fertile. So as much as there was sentiment against the Dakota and the Ho-Chunk because they were native, because they were indigenous, it's also because of the land that they were living on, and people wanted to have that land for themselves. White people, that is. So the marker here that I'm seeing between these two time periods, 1862 and today, is the speed at which injustice is being carried out. And this isn't just me yapping on YouTube and Instagram about this. Here's a quote from someone from the Minnesota Bar Association who also feels that injustice is being carried out right now. So here we are, similar place, similar disdain for people of a different racial identity, similar desire for economic advancement without having to fight with other people for it, and similar miscarriage of justice. And someone could say, well, it's a little different because we're not telling people that they're going to be executed, but in some cases, the immigrants have come here seeking asylum, seeking refuge from circumstances where they could actually be killed, and we're thinking about sending them back. So what's the goal here? What's the ask? What's the action point? First is education and awareness. Operation Metro Surge may no longer be happening, but ICE is still here, and these immigration hearings are happening across the country. It's important to know what happens in these immigration hearings. These are not felony cases, and actually by law, people do not need to have lawyers present in order for these cases to go forward. That again is a connection to the past. What is due process? What does that mean? Is it available for everyone or not, when it is indeed supposed to be available for everyone who is present on U.S. soil? As Christians, we need to be thinking about immigration. We need to be thinking about law and the purpose of the law. We need to be thinking about what it means to hold people who are not Christians accountable to the things that they espouse as their beliefs. We also need to be thinking about incarceration and what the purpose of prisons are. Are prisons a place where people can go and be reformed? Is reform even the right language for this? Is it a place where people can go and have an opportunity to find a new way to live? Because one of my concerns right now as a Christian is a way Christians are talking about people who do indeed need to be deported. Is there a way that someone who is considered a quote-unquote bad person or quote-unquote bad immigrant, not actually identified by that identifier for the entirety of their lives, lives. Number two, who is already working on this? Who is doing direct support for refugees, immigrants, asylees? Who is working to change laws? Who is working to change the system? Who, for people with Christian concerns, is looking to make things look a little more Christian here in the United States? Additionally, for Christians, what does it look like to understand the image of God and how that applies for everyone? Because we have laws and processes on the books that are unjust. So what does it mean to find those unjust laws and make them more just, or just make them completely just? I don't think history is going to remember this time period kindly, and that doesn't mean that we need to do things so that history remembers us kindly. It means that it's going to remember us unkindly because we are doing things that are unjust. And so what does it mean to actually do things that are just? What does it mean to pursue justice? And I think my final thought here is, what does it mean to be repentant and move forward in this time? What does it mean as individuals and as the community to say that what we have done is wrong, and that is repentance works, you're doing a 180? What does it mean to move in the opposite direction and move towards justice, move towards God, and move towards God's desire for the people of the earth?